About a century ago, the Middle Eastern region of Palestine was home to Muslims, Christians, and Jews living together for centuries. There was no massive, defining conflict over this land, but a movement emerged in Europe called Zionism. To understand this history, we need to define that term clearly. Zionists are people who believe in establishing a separate Jewish state, specifically in what they call the Promised Land of Palestine. It is important to note that not all Jewish people are Zionists, and many early Jewish scholars openly opposed the movement. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration. Through this document, Britain officially promised to help establish a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. A major global power had promised a piece of territory it did not rightfully own to a political movement, completely bypassing the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians already living there.
By 1947, the United Nations passed a partition plan. This plan allocated 56% of the Palestinian land to the Jewish population, even though they made up only a third of the demographics at the time. The Palestinians rejected this, as most nations would reject giving up over half their land. On May 14, 1948, Israel declared its independence. In the months that followed, an event occurred that Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, or the catastrophe. 700,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes by military units, starting a cycle of displacement that continues today. Surrounding Arab nations declared war on the newly formed Israel. We have to look at their specific motivations at the time. They were mobilizing to reclaim the land taken from their Palestinian neighbors, not launching a blind holy war based on religion. In 1967, Israel fought what it calls the Six-Day War, resulting in a decisive military victory against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria.
Israel captured the West Bank, Gaza, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. Those territorial captures formed the borders of the conflict today. The use of military force permanently redrew the map, locking millions of displaced people into a multi-generational refugee crisis spanning camps in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and Jordan. Following the 1967 war, France placed an arms embargo on Israel. Losing their primary weapon supplier forced the Israeli government into a corner. They decided to manufacture their own hardware and develop their own technology so they wouldn't have to rely on outside powers again. To execute this, they built systems like the Talpiot program. This elite military academic pipeline pushes top students through 9 years of physics and military training simultaneously. Their final projects become actual defense systems, including the foundations of the Iron Dome missile defense network. Look at this diagram comparing signals intelligence agencies. On the left, America's NSA employs 40,000 people. On the right, Israel's Unit 8200 performs similar functions with just 2,000 personnel. This small, young unit is widely credited with creating Stuxnet, a cyber weapon that physically destroyed Iranian nuclear centrifuges without a single bullet fired. The government launched the Yozma program in 1993, injecting public money into venture capital. It ballooned Israel's VC industry from $5 million to over $3.3 billion in just a decade. Today, Israel attracts 40% of global cybersecurity funding, leading to massive tech acquisitions like Google buying the Israeli firm Wiz for $32 billion. The state's capability relies on a tightly wound, self-reinforcing loop. Military necessity trains elite engineers, who launch tech startups, attracting billions in foreign capital, flowing back into the national economy. But technology doesn't explain the soul of the conflict. For Israeli religious Zionists, capturing Jerusalem in 1967 was the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. That specific ideological drive fuels the continuous, aggressive construction of illegal settlements across the West Bank today, pushing Palestinians out of their homes. On the other side, you have Iran. Their posture stems from a deep historical anti-Western grievance. In 1953, the CIA and British intelligence orchestrated a coup to oust Iran's elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, because he wanted to nationalize Iranian oil. For the next 26 years, the U.S. backed a monarch in Iran until the 1979 Islamic Revolution overthrew him. Under Ayatollah Khomeini, the new Iranian state viewed Israel as an illegitimate Western colonial project, a forced outpost of the West established on Palestinian land. This policy is embedded in the state's identity. They march annually for Al-Quds Day to pledge support for Palestinian liberation. And when Iran fired drones directly at Israel in April 2024, it was a calculated retaliation for an Israeli strike that killed senior Iranian commanders in Damascus. The standoff persists because the combatants are no longer fighting a standard border dispute. They are engaged in an ideological war, driven by biblical prophecies on one side and fierce anti-colonial theory on the other. Yet Israel operates with a merely impenetrable diplomatic shield provided by the United States. The official explanation for this is straightforward. Israel is a democracy, a strategic Middle Eastern ally, and a vital intelligence-sharing partner. But there is a second layer. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, is a massive lobbying group directing millions into U.S. politics. If a politician supports their goals, they get funding. If they dissent, their next election is heavily contested by well-funded opposition. Then there is a third, heavily debated layer of allegations. Jeffrey Epstein, an American financier, reportedly collected secret, compromising information on powerful figures. According to former intelligence officers, Epstein's network was allegedly utilized as a blackmail tool to exert influence over American political elites, though the full extent of this network remains classified. This combination of shared geopolitical strategy, aggressive financial lobbying, and the unresolved questions surrounding elite leverage has created a policy environment where U.S. diplomatic protection for Israel remains virtually unconditional. Today, the Jewish and Arab populations between the Jordan River and Mediterranean Sea are almost perfectly equal. But as birth rates indicate the Palestinian population will soon surpass the Jewish one, Israel must eventually grant an independent Palestinian state or lose its Jewish democratic majority. Inside their own borders, the state is fracturing over laws meant to strip Supreme Court independence. Hundreds of thousands of Israeli citizens took to the streets, clashing with police because they saw their own democracy being dismantled from the inside. Simultaneously, Israel's global image collapsed. In January 2024, the International Court of Justice ruled there was a plausible case for genocide in Gaza. Over 140 countries now recognize a Palestinian state, and Western youth are rapidly pulling away support. Iron domes and multi-billion-dollar tech acquisitions are powerful tools, but they cannot protect a state from a collapsing internal democracy and a complete loss of international legitimacy. The immediate future holds an existential threat. Iran's nuclear program is advancing rapidly, while extreme factions in Israel openly push to annex the West Bank. Escaping this cycle of violence requires three distinct actions. The Palestinians must receive their land and a sovereign state. The status of Jerusalem must be resolved fairly. And the lobbying networks that automatically veto accountability in Washington must lose their grip. When a ruling class weaponizes religion and nationalism to consolidate its own power, the ultimate victims are always the ordinary citizens, whether in Gaza, Tel Aviv, or Tehran, who just want to live their lives. Missiles and separation walls treat the symptoms of a crisis. True security will only come from dismantling the systems of supremacy that started this catastrophe a century ago.